Hi everyone. Hoping that everybody has joined us in on this live stream today. So I'm Hui Ling from Drama Box, but giving a few moments, just a few seconds more, so that more friends will be able to get notified on their Facebook and YouTube as well that we are doing a live stream. But I'm sure, and I actually have already friends texting to say that they are waiting by their computers to come and join us for the session today. So hello, my friends. So please do also leave comments or say hi to each other if you are already here on the live stream with us, so we know who's in the room together. And today we actually have a very exciting session where our friends would love to, meet more of you, to hear maybe some of your own sharings as well, or some questions you might have for our guests today. Of course, if you like to indicate that you are here and you're a bit shy to, post on Facebook or YouTube to say that you are here, you can also, just do a like and share. So we will know that, who's in the room, as well as letting more of our friends know that we are already online live. So back again. So my name is Hui Ling. So I'm the co-artistic director of Drama Box here in Singapore. So this is the second session of ICAF's Singapore Hub, and we are very grateful that we have many friends with us today, as well as our dear guests. But first of all, I would like to say many thanks to our friends in Rotterdam at main ICAF, who are busy running the last leg of their preparation for the ICAF physical session in Rotterdam. But today's session, actually the second session, will be focused on disability arts. And I've been hearing a lot about this group, wonderful group of people in Australia called Footscray Community Arts. Every time, or rather, the few times that I've been to Australia to for work, people have been telling me that, oh no, you have to meet them, you have to meet them. And finally, funnily, within a very short period of time, suddenly, I met up with Daniel, and then subsequently met up with Lucy and the other speaker today, Stephen, online as well. And so I'm really excited that they are here to join us. So they are my new friends, and I hope that you will also enjoy hearing and learning about their work as well. And today, to help moderate the session, is an old friend here in Singapore. So she's Grace Lee Koo, who actually runs Access Path Productions here in Singapore. And Grace is probably, for those of you who had seen the first iteration of ICAF Singapore Hubs 2 years ago, you have been familiar with her because she was on the panel as well, together with me and Janet Pillay, as well as Sunita. So over to you, Grace, today, and thank you for helping to moderate today's session. And back to you, Grace.
Thank you so much, Hui Ling. What a wonderful introduction. It's truly my honor to be here. So I am Grace, and I am an applied theatre practitioner from Singapore. Now, accessibility is a big part of my practice, so I'm very pleased to share that we have speech-to-text translation service for today's panel. You can access the service via the Google Doc link in the chat box. So just look out for that. Do check it out, and then you can share your feedback with us about today's speech-to-text translation service at the end of today's session. So we will hear from our speakers first today, and then we will conclude with a Q&A session. Now, in the meantime, do type in your questions, your comments. There's no such thing as a silly comment or question, really. We could use a joke as well in the chat boxes, and we will make sure that we get to them after the sharing by our three speakers. We have with us today Footscray Community Arts, which is an independent Australian art precinct located in Melbourne's diverse western suburbs. Now, for 50 years, Footscray Community Arts has cultivated a vital role in Australian and international cultural landscape, platforming underrepresented artistic voices. And today we will hear about how they dismantle established boundaries and develop best practice methodologies in community engaged practices. We will learn about ArtLife, which is an arts program for artists with disabilities. And we will also learn about BOLDER, an interdimensional art exhibition by ArtLife artist Stephen Tran, and how it was developed through an ArtLife Residency. Our three speakers are Daniel Santangeli, Artistic Director of Footscray Community Arts, producer Lucy Buxton, and ArtLife artist Stephen Tran. And I shall now hand it over to them so that they can tell you more about themselves and the wonderful work that they do. Daniel, please.
Thank you, Grace. And Lucy, I might ask for you to start sharing the slides, if that's possible. While you're doing that, I'd just like to say thank you so much to ICAF and to Drama Box for inviting Footscray Community Arts to speak today. Australia is, while it's a big continent, it can feel it's still an island, and it can feel very disconnected from the rest of the world. So any opportunity to connect with our global colleagues who work in community engaged practice is always something that we always cherish moments like this. I would also just like to mention I have a deaf cat who can't hear himself meow, so he meows very, very loudly. So if you hear some shrieking over the next 10 minutes while I'm speaking, that's my cat Sebastian. He's just saying hello. There's nothing dramatic going on. We'll jump to the next slide. And in Australia, we always commence gatherings with an acknowledgement of country, which is really about acknowledging the traditional owners, the Indigenous people of Australia. For Footscray Community Arts, we're on the Boonwurrung and the Woiwurrung Wurundjeri people's land. And I'd like to pay respect to their elders, past and present. And I'd like to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded in Australia. Always was, and always will be Aboriginal land. And by extension, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which you gather and to their elders. And I'd also like to pay respect to non-Indigenous elders in the communities that you work in. Community engaged practice didn't come out of nowhere. It's built on the backs of past arts practitioners and community leaders who paved the way for us to do the work that we do now. So I'd like to pay respect to them. This image here is of Yaron Bundle, who is a senior cultural practitioner, and she's doing a smoking ceremony that's at a Indigenous arts festival that we run at Footscray Community Arts. We'll jump to the next slide, which is a picture of one of our buildings. It's an old bluestone building, and it really is the origin story of Footscray Community Arts starts with this building. It's kind of a bit funny to be, Footscray Community Arts is so much about people. It's kind of funny to be showing a picture of a building, but it all started here in 1974. At the time, Footscray, which is a suburb in Melbourne's western suburbs. It was an area that was very cut off from a lot of infrastructure in Melbourne CBD. Had a lot of poor infrastructure itself, pretty poor roads, very limited amenities, and no cultural infrastructure at all. So no place for people for artists to make work or for people to perform. There was none of that in Melbourne's west. It was a very industrial area, and the home to a lot of, at that time, Italian and Greek migrants to Australia, and predominantly labourers and members of the union movement. So the union movement in Australia really came to the fore in the 1970s. It was a group of labourers who were advocating for an 8-hour working day, for fundamental rights in the workplace, and they did so through protest and advocacy. And that very much is deeply embedded in the work of Footscray Community Arts, is that sense of advocacy. In 1974, the local council, the local government, were about to demolish this building. And a member of one of the unions who worked as a meat worker in an abattoir saw the building about to be demolished and jumped in front of the bulldozer, stopped it, ran around the corner, called one of his mates on the payphone and said, "We've got to save this building. It's too important to go." And this is a building that was built, over 100 years earlier as a piggery. And if it wasn't for those unionists picketing and protesting to save this building, it would have been demolished. It would have been gone. And once they saved the building, those labourers said, actually, we need a place for creativity and culture in Melbourne's western suburbs because there's none of that here for us. And they very much made this building a place which under the banner of access for all, and founded Footscray Community Arts. And the idea of access for all was that everyone should have access to creativity, that creativity is a fundamental human right. But for various reasons, there are huge swathes of the population who don't get access to culture and creativity in the same way that a lot of privileged communities do. If we jump to the next slide, we'll kind of see a bit of a topographic view of what Footscray Community Arts looks like now. So you can see in the far end of that image, that bluestone building, the one that was saved. But Footscray Community Arts has expanded a lot in the 50 years. So it since has an outdoor amphitheatre, which you'll see that sort of floating blue disc on the right-hand side of the image. And on the left, you'll see a large warehouse building, which is a gallery and performance space. And there's also a large area of lawns, and we're positioned there along the Maribyrnong River. We've also recently received investment from the government so instead of knocking down our buildings, they're giving us money to build a building. That floating blue disc is actually an indicative image of what a new outdoor performance space will look like for Footscray Community Arts. The other blue space there on the left-hand side that looks a bit like a swimming pool is a new gallery space that we'll be building in the coming years. So Footscray Community Arts has grown a lot, but still that idea that creativity is a human right, that idea of access for all is fundamental to who we are. The communities that we work with all have something in common. In an Australian context, they all face significant social justice issues and barriers to accessing the arts and the arts and cultural industry. So we describe our communities as First Nations communities, artists with disability, people of colour or culturally diverse communities, and LGBTQIA+ or queer communities. The western suburbs has changed a lot as well. Immense population growth, immense gentrification, immense overdevelopment. And so Footscray Community Arts kind of remains this sort of pocket of creativity in a rapidly changing neighbourhood. And we're still independent as well, so which is quite remarkable. So we're very fortunate that we're able to produce and do the work that we do on our own terms. What I'm going to do today is just very quickly talk through the different communities that we work with. I know we're going to talk predominantly today about working with artists with disability, but I kind of want to talk a little bit about some of the other communities that we work with, because we do take an intersectional lens to the communities that we work with. And I think it's important context for understanding the work that we do. So if we jump to the next slide. So one community that we work with is our Indigenous or First Nations community. We're led by a very long-standing Indigenous advisory group who have been with us for almost 20 years, providing advice and guidance to the work that we do, particularly with Indigenous community. They're made up of senior Indigenous cultural practitioners and elders. And they co-curate all of our Indigenous programming, as well as providing advice on Indigenous protocol and ceremony for us. This is Mitch Mahoney that you'll see in the image here. He's a local Bunburong artist. And this project is a really great example of how we work really with all of our artists, but particularly with First Nations artists. This is a project that Mitch Mahoney did called Eel Trap. It was him in collaboration with his aunt, who is a senior and very well-respected arts practitioner in Australia, Marie Clark. And they built a large-scale eel trap. So Australian Indigenous people would often build these kind of eel traps that look like windsocks that would float in the river and catch eels. Together with his aunt, Mitch created a large-scale eel trap out of river reed and stringy bark, together with over 200 community members who came in, learnt about Indigenous techniques of working and making, and built this massive eel trap. When Mitch did this project back in 2019, he was very much an emerging artist, but because of the skills that he learned through this process, he then took on his own project that he was the lead on, called Weaving Sustainable Culture, where he created these large-scale bamboo sculptures in a similar making technique, and again with hundreds of community members coming in, participating in the workshops and constructing these canoes with him. That idea of intergenerational learning, working with artists over a really long period of time, the idea of connecting traditional ways of making with contemporary arts practice are kind of all hallmarks of the ways that we work at Footscray Community Arts. We'll jump to the next slide, as a teaser, you can see Lucy and Stephen there in the middle, who you'll hear from in a second. I won't talk too much. I won't talk much at all about how we work with artists with disability, but I guess to acknowledge that work, and that Lucy and Stephen will pick up talking about this in a couple of minutes. If we jump to the next slide, one community, this is really multiple communities, but we work with people of colour and culturally and linguistically diverse communities. I guess in an Australian context, it's important to understand that we're a white English-speaking majority country, and that often for people who are people of colour or black or speak languages other than English, or who are recent migrants to Australia, they're often marginalised in an Australian context, and often face significant social justice issues, as well as barriers to accessing the arts and cultural industry. Melbourne's western suburbs particularly has always seen every sort of wave of migration that has come to Australia is kind of reflected really strongly in Melbourne's western suburbs. So there's a very strong Horn of Africa diaspora community in Melbourne's west, in strong Asian diaspora as well, so Chinese language, Vietnamese diaspora, South Asian diaspora, that are present where we work at Footscray Community Arts. And this is a really great project called House of the Mother Tongue. That was a recent project that we did, which was all about, which was by a group of Vietnamese artists who wanted to look at how they could preserve Vietnamese language, which is very quickly eroding as a spoken language in an Australian context following the wave of migration after the Vietnamese War to Australia. This was a project that was done 2 exhibitions in 2 different locations, one at Footscray Community Arts and one at a gallery in the city, and a singing bus that travelled between the 2. This is the singing bus here, and this was a really beautiful moment where one young Vietnamese boy got up and had been learning Vietnamese from his father after his primary school stopped teaching Vietnamese as a second language in the school. So his father picked up the job of teaching language to him, and he got up and sang a song to everyone on the bus in Vietnamese, and it was a really beautiful moment. And also, we're also increasingly working internationally as well, particularly with, I guess, the origin countries for a lot of the communities that we work with. And as a way of, I guess, acknowledging that for a lot of our communities, they still have strong ties back to the countries that they've migrated to Australia from. And that for Footscray Community Arts, it's important that we work internationally to kind of, I guess, embrace the complex and rich relationship that exists between communities in Australia and their home communities. So just very quickly, the other community, so we jump to the next slide. The next other community that we work with is the queer community. I guess the example I'd want to give about the queer community is a film festival that we're currently supporting, which is a transgender film festival. We're supporting them to establish themselves as a film festival. Had been running for several years, but had kind of the pandemic had kind of sort of wiped them off the face of the earth in a way, and they'd stopped operating. And so we've been supporting them to restructure. And I guess I wanted to give that as an example, because I think so much of community engaged practice isn't just about necessarily people, but it's also about helping people navigate really complex bureaucratic systems. So part of our work is supporting artists to really be leaders of their own companies and organisations, so that they can do their work, I guess, without the support of Footscray Community Arts. And I guess if we jump to the next slide, I just want to make mention of a piece of work that we did in the last couple of years, which was about establishing a methodology for community engaged practice at Footscray Community Arts. That was when I started 3 years ago at Footscray Community Arts. I realised that we had all these really great community engaged practitioners working at Footscray Community Arts, but they all spoke a different language and had different approaches to community engaged practice. So we worked together to create a kind of methodology of 10 questions for community engaged practitioners, which were intended to be kind of 10 questions that you could ask on any community engaged project, to kind of help be a bit of a prompt for best practice. And that kind of included questions like, who's not here that should be here? Who's around the table making key decisions? Is there a clear social contract with the community that we're working with? How can we actively build relationships? And it kind of goes on and on, over 10 questions as prompts for community engaged practitioners. And always happy to kind of share that if that piques anyone's interest at all that's listening today. And just quickly on the next slide, we also run artist development programs, which are really intended to kind of be supporting artists to develop their work, to build skills, and then it also allows us to build relationships with artists that then can potentially move into being presentation opportunities with those artists. Or it's enough to sometimes just to help artists build their skills and support them to kind of create pathways into the broader arts industry in Australia. All right, I think I've gone over time, so I'm going to stop there. But I think that idea of development programs and them being pathways to presenting artists is a really great introduction to our ArtLife program and Stephen Tran's work. So I'm going to hand over to Lucy now. Lucy Buxton is one of our producers here at Footscray Community Arts, and has worked with Stephen and works on our ArtLife program, supporting artists with disability to create really ambitious work. So Lucy, over to you.
Thanks so much, Daniel, and thanks for having us, Drama Box. It's really a huge pleasure to be here. So I'm joining you tonight from Footscray Community Arts on site in Melbourne's West. And in the room with me is Stephen Tran as well, who is an ArtLife artist. So I'll speak more broadly about ArtLife, and then I'll hand you over to him to speak about his most recent exhibition, which is called BOLDER, after that. So I'll just start sharing. So I'd also like to start by acknowledging that Footscray Community Arts is on the lands of the Eastern Kulin Nation. And I'd like to acknowledge the ancestors of this land and pay my respects to their elders past and present. And yeah, as Daniel said, I'd also like to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded in Australia, and this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So I have worked with artists who have a disability over the last 8 years across many different capacities. I think I started in about 2018 at Footscray Community Arts supporting workshops, facilitated workshops as well. I stepped into the ArtLife management team, and then I stepped into a producer role last year. So my work now involves working with artists from the local community of Melbourne's West, and that's through a program called ArtLife. So within ArtLife, we work with artists on projects from start to finish. We start by really getting to know and really getting an understanding of what the artist's creative vision is. And then we support them to develop this by finding links between the idea and what is happening within the broader arts industry. We then work with the artists to curate and produce their ideas as outcomes, such as exhibitions and public art projects. And I think probably the most important thing about this process is that our work is really grounded in the artists having complete ownership over the entire process and the final outcome of the project. So just to give a bit of an overview of the ArtLife program. So ArtLife is a core program at Footscray Community Arts for artists who have lived experience of disability. And most artists in ArtLife have an intellectual disability. The program currently supports around 40 artists, give or take, to build an artistic practice. And there's many different reasons why an artist would join ArtLife. Some artists want to learn a new skill. Some artists have been practicing for many years and want to dedicate more time to their practice, to an existing practice. Some artists just really want to be a part of a creative community. And then there are artists who are more interested in exhibiting or selling their work, or have some really serious ambition to pursue being a professional contemporary artist as a vocation. So in essence, ArtLife is facilitated as a creative space for storytelling. So we focus on supporting artists to have voice, take leadership, and work towards ambitious goals. And the way we do this is we really center the artists in all decision making around their work, but we also support them to have input in how the program is structured and run. So in ArtLife, artists are supported to realize what is possible with their work so that they can make informed decisions about what they would like to do with their arts practice. So we don't just support artists to make decisions, we support them to understand what is possible and what those decisions could be for them. So this is a really key part of our work because it unlocks deeper agency and deeper decision making for artists. And I think it's important to note that many artists in the ArtLife program have not had many opportunities to make decisions for themselves or many chances to be leaders. So we're really, through ArtLife, we really shift this narrative by supporting ArtLife artists to take the lead with their arts practice. And we also advocate for artists to be recognised as people who are producing really high quality work that sparks important conversations more broadly. And we also encourage artists to aim for outcomes that may fall outside of their current skill set with projects as well. So we have a really huge network here at Footscray Community Arts and a lot of connections and which provide artists with opportunities to collaborate. So if an artist wants to do something and they don't have the current skill set to achieve that, we link them with someone who can make that happen with their expertise. And collaborators center ArtLife artists in the project and are contracted to expand the work with their expertise. So we always work to the artist's pace, but we also challenge the artists to work to timelines, produce their best work, and achieve what it is that they've set out to do. We build flexibility into the program, especially with communication. So, for example, during group discussions, we really welcome artists to use the communication method that works best for them. So, for example, we have a few artists who are nonverbal, and we really encourage those artists to use movement to share their perspectives. We use visual communication as well, and we also spend time writing to artists during workshops if they require written communication or if they prefer written communication over spoken communication. And we really try to embed access as much as possible into exhibitions as well through exhibition materials such as catalogues. So the way the program is structured, there's 3 different streams within ArtLife that have different purposes and which reflect why an artist would choose to be in that stream. So the first one is workshops. So workshops are based around a skill such as visual art. They're facilitated in groups of around 10 artists. Which really fosters a sense of community around an art form. They're not necessarily outcomes-based, but they are orientated around artists' individual goals. And we support artists to have ambition with their work, and then we track artists' progress towards achieving this. And every aspect of ArtLife involves supporting artist-led practice and centering artist decisions, including in how the workshops are structured and what the workshops are about. So the next stream is art industry, which connects ArtLife artists with galleries and current trends in contemporary arts. So this stream really addresses the isolation that people with an intellectual disability sometimes face with accessing galleries and art experiences. So this stream is facilitated in a very small group, so between 3 and 5 artists who go on weekly gallery visits and attend performances together. And it also involves forming relationships with local galleries and theatre companies, which results in shared learnings about accessibility as well. And the third stream is for artists who want to take their arts practice to the next level. So this is for artists who have been in the program for quite some time and have a really strong existing practice and are really ready to take the next step with their work. And we do this through supporting the artists to work towards an ambitious solo outcome. So so part of my role is to facilitate this program, which is an artist development program, and we use Footscray Community Arts as a resource as much as possible, and present these outcomes at Footscray Community Arts. So this program really allows the artists to get to know their style and their voice. The artists develop a goal and then they're connected with the wider team at Footscray Community Arts who support the artist to make that goal happen. Sometimes goals are really huge, but instead of discouraging that or shrinking the goal, we instead build scaffolding with the artist. So we'll break that goal down into a series of steps and support the artists to achieve those steps. So acknowledging that sometimes it can take a really long time to achieve that initial goal, sometimes years. So an example of that is an artist, Diego Pizarro, who his long-term goal was to create a comic book out of a character that he invented called Electric Man. But this was quite an ambitious goal, and so what we did is we broke that goal down into steps. And the first step was for Diego to develop an exhibition and a public art project that really allowed him to experiment with narrative in an unrefined way. So that was the first step for his development, working towards a comic book. So I would like to just take a moment to introduce the next speaker, who is Stephen Tran. So Stephen Tran is an artist who has been in the ArtLife program for quite a long time, for about 10 years. And he's also part of ArtLife Residency as well. So Stephen has just finished up a major outcome for this program, which was called BOLDER. So BOLDER was an interdimensional augmented reality exhibition. So BOLDER is an example of how Footscray Community Arts supports artists in the ArtLife program to achieve a really ambitious goal. When we first asked Stephen, when he first joined the ArtLife Residency program, what he wanted to do, what his goal was, he said that he wanted to create an exhibition that people would need to wear 3D glasses to see. And he was really interested in immersing people into an experience of how Stephen sees the world. So over time, the 3D glasses idea evolved to virtual reality goggles. But then after being connected to people that work in this industry and in mixed reality, in the mixed reality field, Stephen realized that augmented reality was actually more suited to his ideas. So we worked with Stephen to map out steps towards achieving this goal. Stephen didn't have any experience working with animation or with augmented reality, so we knew that collaborators were needed in order to make this project happen. So for BOLDER, Stephen exhibited really brightly coloured drawings and paintings, which represented visions from his dreams and his waking life. He developed this really intricate pattern, which he calls a spooky staircase, which functioned in the exhibition as a portal between dimensions and between worlds. So this pattern features all throughout Stephen's drawings and all throughout his work. And it was used in the exhibition design in the same way. So it was used as a portal amongst decals and also the digital design of the whole show. So Stephen had weekly meetings with an animator where he would talk about his ideas, and then the animator would interpret these with movement and sound. And he then also collaborated with a team of emerging mixed reality developers who worked with Stephen to turn his ideas into digital experiences. So one of those experiences was something that could be seen on an iPad. So when the audience held the iPad up to the work, they could see Stephen's drawings expand with movement and animation and sound. So another experience that Stephen created with BOLDER was a digital artwork called Tower, which let audiences build their own digital sculpture out of Stephen's squares, and then watch it either topple over or disappear into a portal on the ground. So with touch, audiences could build a tower out of infinite squares, which would then topple over or fall into the spooky staircase portal. And the third experience that Stephen created was a game. So it was called Cube Crush, and it was based on elements of his artwork. And yeah, it was based on Candy Crush, and it was a really, really fun and interactive experience for audiences. So one more thing about BOLDER before I hand you over to Stephen. We also pitched this exhibition to a festival called the Big Anxiety Festival, which was based in Melbourne, and it was a festival that features interactive experiences at the intersection of art and mental health. So this, being part of a festival, really opened up more opportunities for visibility and for Stephen to reach more people with his work. All right, so I might just pass you over to Stephen, who will introduce himself and give you a bit more insight into his recent show.
Hi everyone out there. My name is Steven, or you can call me Steve-O. I am an artist and performer. I am joining you from Melbourne in Australia. I was born in China and my family are from Vietnam. I am an artist here at ArtLife at Footscray Community Arts. I have been an artist here for a long time. I started in 2012 and it's kind of fun. I feel like I can be myself, be proud, and I like spending time with friends and artists too. Boulder was extraordinary and wonderful. It was colorful and it reflected my dreams and working life. I started my work for Boulder in Melbourne's lockdown in 2020. I made many drawings of squares and colors and structures in my own style or from my room at home. These were based on dreams I had during lockdown and showed new realities from my imagination. I create a painting called Spooky Staircases. They are portals into different worlds and takes people to different realities. My spooky staircases use, were, were used throughout the designers of the show on walls and windows and cushions to teleport people to different worlds. I work as lead artist as part of a team of collaborators to take my work to, to the next level. I work with two animators who make my drawing dance and move. They brought my work to life and my dreams come true when I worked with a team of people who made my work into AR on iPads. Powder let us our bodies, head and soul. It brought my ideas into speed. It was allowed me to show artwork that I started a long time ago. Other older ideas had a like I like seeing this. I learned more about myself and the big bright idea from my head. They were bright like the sun. Bolder were help people to be who they and to be to dream bigger. It was amazing and it helped me to learn do more. It was fun, fantastic. Thank you for thank you very much to the German box for having us. Thank you everyone to listen to me, listen and for being here today. I just want to finish by showing you one of the animators from my exhibition.
So I think Stephen would like to end his talk just by showing one of the animations that he produced with an animator for BOLDER. Well, that concludes our presentation, so thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Lucy, Stephen, and of course, Daniel, for just sharing the wonderful work that you all do. And now's the time for us to kickstart our Q&A, my favorite part, as always. So those of you who are tuning in from all over, whether you're on Facebook or you're on YouTube, please do pop your questions into the chat area, and then we will get to those questions, I promise you. But you know what? In the meantime, let's buy some time for people to think, okay? And I have a general question that I would like to open it up to Daniel, to Stephen, to Lucy. From your personal lens, your opinion, how has the disability arts practice in Melbourne or Australia as a whole, how has that evolved in, say, the past 10 to 15 years?
I can have a go at answering that. I think in an Australian context, disability arts practice has really happened at the same time as advocacy from people with disability, and their families and communities around social justice for people with disability. A shift, which really represents a shift, I guess, from the medical model of disability, the idea that people are disabled, which is the medical model, that the issue is the person with disability, and a shift to the social model of disability, the idea that it's society that disables people, and that shift has been really fundamental in establishing a sense of self-determination for people with disability. The idea that they should be the ones who are making key decisions about their own lives, and we've seen that reflected artistically as well. That a shift towards artist-led processes rather than, I guess, more kind of traditional ways of working with artists with disability, which tends to be more kind of therapeutic, or kind of about, here's a paintbrush and this is just something for you to fill your time with, and a kind of a stronger shift to actually artists with disability have something important to say, and we should be listening to it. I think the other thing as well is the introduction of the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So that's basically a scheme in Australia funded by the government that provides funding to individuals with disability to have self-determination over how money should be spent on their own needs. That was introduced probably about 10 years ago now, and it was a big shift from service providers having access to money, and then if you're a person with disability, you could either participate in a service provider's what service provider was offering or not, to a shift to the money going straight to the person with disability, and they getting them having the power of choice and control over how they could spend their own money, whether that was access to interpreters or access to places like Footscray Community Arts. The the fundamental to the National Disability Insurance Scheme is the idea of choice and control, that choice and control sits with people with disability. And we've seen that reflected in artistic practice as well. So the way that we work at Footscray Community Arts is it's always about, well, how can we place control in the hands of the artists that we work with, and how can we make sure that they're the ones making the choices based on, you know, kind of our expertise as arts practitioners and facilitators. So we can input into the choices that they make, but at the end of the day, they're the ones who make the final decisions on things. So anything you would add to that, Lucy, Stephen?
No, I think that was a fantastic summary, Daniel. I think we're really supporting artists to go beyond participation in the arts. It's really supporting artists to become leaders and to really take the lead on important conversations through their work.
Absolutely. The self-advocacy when resources are being placed into the direct hands of artists, and with that combination of talent and ambition, like in the case of Stephen, they are able to determine their career paths. And also, I think systematically it push the overall art scene, you know, to level up, that we have to move away from disability and arts where it's just recreational, it's just charity based. And that is just a wonderful sharing, Daniel and Lucy and Stephen, about how the landscape has evolved over time. So Trevor, I think there is a question here from Trevor. Let me just hover over and show. Is that showing? So I think Trevor here has clearly paid attention to what Stephen was sharing and asked the question of the starting point of being an animator, because animation clearly is an integral part of taking Stephen's work to the next level. So with Stephen, perhaps you would like to share on, you know, how did this idea even come about of developing your work with digitalization? And how's it like working with animators, perhaps?
I think I can maybe speak to this one. So Stephen, Stephen worked really closely with an animator. So Stephen did the drawing, and then he worked with an animator to expand the drawing. So they had, so he worked with an animator who had many years of experience, and they had these weekly meetings where they'd sit together, and remember, you would talk about. Stephen would talk about the visions that he had for the work and how he wanted it to move, what he wanted it to sound like. You know, he used references like trains or windows. Just really had a really great brainstorm session with the animator, and I think over time, Stephen and the animator formed a really great collaborative relationship, and were able to really understand each other artistically. And the animator produced these really amazing works that really, I think Stephen was really happy with, like really showed your initial vision in them. But then, yeah, Stephen would also have feedback sessions with him as well, where he would, you know, if it wasn't quite right, they would have revision sessions, and but I think the result was really outstanding.
Wonderful. And I think Trevor has just a little follow-up question, which is, I guess, in say a context like Footscray Community Arts, can the artist choose more than one type of art to be involved in?
Yeah, definitely. So the way ArtLife works is that there's lots of different workshops with lots of different art forms. So each workshop will have a different art form that it's being structured around. So things like digital arts, visual arts, dance, and yeah, I think for artists who are working towards really big projects, working with collaborators is something that's really key as well. So it just opens up, like ArtLife artists will always be the lead artists on those projects, but it just opens up the scope to think bigger and achieve more, I think.
So there's a diversity when it comes to even perhaps the scaffolding and the offerings of, you know, how each artist can progress, their entry points and the pace of their growth, I would say. And that's happening, that's being facilitated at Footscray. So let's dig into the next question by Jeffrey. Hello, Jeffrey, old friend. Jeffrey is curious about if the speakers could share their biggest challenges in doing what is it that you do? Biggest challenges, biggest fires to put out, mountains to scale. Stephen, any?
While Lucy and Stephen are plotting an answer, I might just comment that I think I mentioned before the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So organisations have to register to become a service provider, and so Footscray Community Arts is one of the few art centres in Australia who is a National Disability Insurance Scheme provider, and that scheme is incredibly complex and incredibly bureaucratic, and we have a whole team of three core staff who exclusively work on four staff who exclusively work on the ArtLife program and supporting our artists to navigate the disability insurance scheme. It's a scheme that is if there's any listeners in Australia will know that it's very problematic. It's been been lots of moves to kind of knock people off the scheme, to make it overly bureaucratic, so it's incredibly hard to get onto the scheme or stay on the scheme. It's incredibly difficult for many people with disability to find to navigate their way through that process. So a big challenge for us is supporting our artists and their families and carers to actually navigate that system. And again, I think that's a good example of the kind of the harsh world of bureaucracy that we live in, butting up against artistic practice, and that so much of our job is the art, but then is also just navigating really complex systems and processes to make the art possible. Lucy and Steve, have you finished plotting your answer yet? Did I buy you enough time?
I was just gonna say that that comment on this one, I accept the challenge for sure.
Stephen accepts the challenge.
That's his spirit, yes? If it's easy, why do it? The harder it is, Stephen is up for it.
But I think maybe I was just talking to Stephen about maybe perhaps a challenge when Stephen first joined the residency program was just that you had so many ideas, like so many huge ideas, and it was hard to choose one of them, I think. But yeah, I think Stephen's a very ambitious artist who thinks really big, which is really a really big strength. So I think it would have been hard to let go of ideas in order to make one idea happen.
So Lucy, Daniel, I see you both as disability allies with all the work that you do. And I think we all agree that the opposite of disable is enable. So what was the process of working on a project like BOLDER with Stephen? What are some of the resources, human resources, time, money, logistics, communications, bureaucracy that Daniel talked about, you know, that as artistic director, as producers, you will have to put in place?
Do you want me to? I can answer this one if you like. Yeah, I think it was a huge project with a lot of different people involved, and it was really organization wide how it was supported. I think Stephen, the first step towards BOLDER was actually another exhibition which was called BOLD. So that was BOLD was Stephen's first ever solo exhibition, which was presented here at Footscray Community Arts. It was a much smaller show, and just it had one animation, and the rest were paintings and drawings. And yeah, I think through documenting that show and using that show, Stephen kind of using that show to understand his ideas a bit more deeply, we were able to support Stephen to apply for funding, project funding. So yeah, Stephen received funding from Australia Council of the Arts to cover the costs of the exhibition, like the exhibition costs and like the collaborator fees. But there was also a lot of in-kind contributions to the project. And in addition to that, I would say probably a lot of support through the collaborations. There was, yeah, it was, I think locally, you know, for example, the collaborator team were from a university which Footscray Community Arts has a partnership with. So I think there was a big resource in using those existing connections to really support the project as well. And I think everyone was really working to a shared vision with like everyone that worked on the project, and that vision was really Stephen's vision. So it was really great to work in that way.
Anything from Stephen? I have a question for you coming up, okay, Stephen? So just prepare yourself for that. But in the meantime, Francis has left a pretty wonderfully written comment. To Daniel, you've shared really simply and clearly the ethical framework guiding your work now. Artists are in control rather than positioned as beneficiaries and participants. Social model versus medical model. Thank you for that. I guess that for Footscray to get to where you are now, there must have been some transition period, probably over a period of time, to adjust your programs and approaches to get to where you are now and how you're working today. So I would love to hear from the staff and organization. Is that it?
That's it. It was too ran out
Or did
of,
it get
space.
Yeah, Francis, I think you need to give us the sequel, part 2. Should love to hear from.
I can talk to that if you like.
Yes, please.
So I mean, I guess I can talk about a transition that has happened, and then one that is currently happening now. I spoke before about the introduction of the National Disability Insurance Scheme. I said it was introduced 10 years ago. That's not true. It was introduced about 5 years ago. And that was before the insurance scheme was introduced, Footscray Community Arts received money directly from the government to run ArtLife, the program that Stephen is part of. To be honest, it was a bit of a gravy train for Footscray Community Arts. We got funded quite well to support that program. And the program had been running at that time for, about 15 years and hadn't changed much in that time. It was kind of very much that kind of just sort of workshop model. Artists would kind of get dropped off at the beginning of the day, stay, then do some art and then leave, and there was no kind of real the voice of the artist wasn't really central in terms of what the program looked like. what their goals would be, and how they might be able to set really ambitious goals and achieve them. So when the introduction of the insurance scheme came in, it meant that we had to completely change the model of that program. This was before my time. I started 2 years after this, so I wasn't here for the trauma of having to completely change a program. But like I said before, that idea of choice and control is central to the national insurance scheme. And so that was something that Footscray Community Arts took on quite seriously and made that a really fundamental part of the program and how it runs. And that was really that was transformational for the program, and has taken years to kind of make that shift and transition. I guess in terms of current shifts and changes for Footscray Community Arts, in the Australian context, there is a lot of talk around diversity in artistic practice, and I mean diverse representation. So, many galleries and performance venues and art centres will curate really hard to have a really diverse representation of artists in their lineup. And I think for Footscray Community Arts, we see that as probably not good enough. That actually, that's still just the old model of the kind of freak show, and that's not my philosophy. That's an idea from Jacob Bahim, who's a senior Indigenous artist in Australia. Talks about the idea that the freak show has been the dominant curatorial model forever, particularly in Australian context, and that often it's a white, able-bodied, straight, cisgendered curator, predominantly male, who is the kind of curator of the freak show. And that actually now the idea of diversity is just a sanitized version of that. So for Footscray Community Arts, we want to move beyond diversity and the idea of representation, and that actually it should be led by the communities that we work with, that they should be running Footscray Community Arts. They do, they're on our board, they're my boss, but that they should also be running the arts industry as well, and not just being appearing on stages, but also be the ones who have that sense of self-determination over the way that the narratives that we tell and how we tell them, and not just as artists.
There's a question here for Stephen. Depending how long you've been involved with Footscray, you mentioned that you've been working with them for a long time. Yes. And as an artist, Stephen, have you felt changes in the way that you've been working? What do you think about the way, say, back then working at Footscray, and then now, a good 10 years later, I believe, working with Footscray, back then and now, is there a difference for you, Stephen?
Yeah.
Yeah, how?
Yeah.
How have things changed?
I was started here a long time already. But now I am still here, and I just talk about that something like this. I just want to say that this comment on the Facebook to show like how come become myself, or being so much respectful ourselves as well.
So I heard that you've grown to kind of like find a way. How do you be yourself and to respect yourself, right? And that came from
we respect each other.
Yeah. And that happened over time as you spend more time at Footscray Community Arts.
Yeah.
Yes, there is a little shout out from Kevin Chang, who is an artist that I work with in Singapore as well. And 3 words for you. Oh, 4. Stephen, you are great.
Oh, cool.
Kevin's an artist himself. He lives with Down syndrome. And, I need to match make both of you because he's a prolific painter and performer as
about
well. Yes?
the Down syndromes, I don't have one as well.
Yes. Okay. And we have a question from Kwan Sian. Hello, friend. We're all friends here. So has the ArtLife program transformed in any way after Melbourne's experience of the pandemic?
Hi, Casey. Nice to hear from you. You were here for the Melbourne's pandemic, Casey, so you know exactly what it was like. But I might, Lucy, I might let you answer that question because you worked really closely on ArtLife during that time.
Hi, Casey. Nice to see you virtually. Yeah, well, I think when the pandemic first hit in early 2020, we really pivoted the program pretty quickly online. So yeah, we started running Zoom workshops at a reduced capacity. Just really to give people that sense of continuity. We really found that it wasn't in any way a replacement of the real, being in person and being connected to place. I think our work at Footscray Community Arts is so grounded in place, and really, it's a really important part of what we do. So it didn't replace that, but it did kind of provide people with a connection, a supportive connection to their arts practice throughout Melbourne's lockdowns. So I think we found for people it was a real lifeline during that time. I think we were also doing things like we were calling artists as well. Just to touch base with people. We had schedules so that some artists who are particularly isolated would get a phone call every single day from a different staff member, just to really just to kind of provide that extra support. So I think it definitely did change a lot because of the pandemic, and of course COVID. When we came back to the centre out of lockdown, there was still COVID was on everyone's minds and still is. It's been interesting navigating that and trying to keep everyone safe, but also trying to work with people in person as well. So it's an interesting balance, I think. But yeah, I think there has been some silver linings, like the online component has really opened up, I guess, opportunities for accessibility for people as well. We had hybrid workshops for a while for people who either didn't feel comfortable leaving the house because of COVID, or for whatever reason wanted to stay at home and could still access the workshop once we did resume back in person. I think interesting challenges, I think, like the rest of the world.
Thank you, Casey. So FCA's vision is that all communities are valued as makers of culture. That's really apparent in the DNA of the work that you do. So I'm curious to learn more about how your local community has responded or even rallied for, say, a program like ArtLife and its artists in the very space of Footscray.
I mean, I think we just, We just recently passed the 100,000 people mark of visitors coming to Footscray Community Arts. So that was our total number of people coming to Footscray Community Arts last year. I think it was like 114,000. And that, I think, for us, it tells us that that our local community and audiences in Melbourne are really hungry for stories like Stephen's, that they really want to see people come. They really want to see stories told in a really authentic way, and see what diverse artists actually have their voices heard. So I think for us, we see that support through kind of people coming to the exhibitions and to our performances. I mean, Melbourne's western suburbs is very. There's immense pride in the western suburbs. Anyone who lives there, if you work or live in Melbourne's west, you have to support the Bulldogs, which is the local football team. And if you don't, you're immediately exiled from Melbourne's west. So see, he's a Doggies supporter. It's there's immense pride, and I think that's partly because of the history of Melbourne's west of being cut off from the CBD, and there's I guess a bit of a kind of not a chip on people's shoulder, but a kind of maybe a pride on people's shoulder where they're like, yeah, I'm from the west, and we deserve really great stories. We deserve access to arts and culture here, and so there's that sense of immense pride that I think really drives them. So I think for all of the work we do, we always see the local community really rally around Footscray Community Arts.
Wonderful. Stephen, have you felt the love? Have you felt the love from the Footscray community when they come to your shows,
And I think it's long time. That's long time. I used to beg. I was beg for Western Bulldogs long time ago already, but still I am just support my team as well for my disciplinary.
so you feel that support for you as well?
That's why I'm a huge fan of Western Bulldogs now.
Wonderful. Go Bulldogs.
And
that leads me to the question, you in your work in Boulder, you encourage your audiences to be distinct, daring, and different. So Stephen, what does being distinct, daring, and different mean to you?
I was gonna say about that the question you asked me already. I just want to say that to be proud and to show kindness and to be helpful and adventurous.
To show kindness, to be proud, to be adventurous.
Yeah.
And one more. I missed out one more. What was that one?
I think it was helpful.
To be helpful. Wonderful, wonderful. And what are you currently working on? What's next for Stephen Tran?
Ooh.
Ooh.
This is gonna be good for me. It's a little bit. It's a bit too early to know about it yet. I'm not sure about it yet. Just wait and see what I do this year. I would like to keep on working with shapes and animators. I love to draw.
So watch this space.
Watch the space. Yes. I mean, we're all connected digitally now, right? So it's so easy to just go online, check out Footscray Community Arts socials, and find out what Stephen is up to, and the rest of the ArtLife artists, the residents as well. You know, now that we have managed to share this platform together today. So before we go, any last words from Stephen, Lucy, and Daniel?
I might just, it was great to hear from Stephen about what's next for him. I think for, in terms of what's next for Footscray Community Arts, we are in the final stages of developing a disability and inclusion action plan, which sounds very corporate and very boring. But one of the things we realised was that the ArtLife program is incredible in the way that it works with artists with disability. But in a lot of the other work we do, we don't necessarily see those same strengths in other program areas in our other work. So we wanted to take the strengths of the ArtLife program and see how we can come up with a bit of a plan of how we can transfer those strengths to to our front of house team, to our Indigenous program, to the work we do with culturally diverse communities. So that's something that we're doing at the moment and is a real priority for us. And we're in the final stages of writing it, and then we'll start rolling it out next year.
So watch the space. That is Footscray. How about Lucy?
I just want to say thank you so much. Thanks for having us on the panel today. And it's been really great. It's been really great to meet you and to learn more about Drama Box as well in the process.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So wrapping up today's wonderful session, we could, once again, thank you for joining us today. Now, if you have joined us midway, no worries, because this session will be online on Drama Box's Facebook and YouTube channels. So do share the word for those who couldn't be with us today. This will be on. You can always watch, catch up. And thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Lucy. And thank you, Stephen, for your generosity, for your time and talent and such invaluable sharing. And I think we can bring up our feedback QR code. That's the page, everyone. So thank you for joining us. Please share your feedback with us by scanning the QR code that you have over here. We have offered a speech to text interpretation service today. So we would love to hear your feedback, honest feedback about how that worked for you so that we can continue to improve our accessibility efforts. We are always working on that. So please do share with us. And also next month on ICAF's SG Hub, Tour Day Art Project, the journey of art in everyday life in the suburbs. So from the suburbs of Melbourne, we're going to go to the suburbs of Japan. And that's happening on the 10th of March, 2023, 5 p.m. Singapore time and 10 a.m. in the other time zone. So once again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Goodbye for now. And in the meantime, please take care and please stay safe, everyone. Take care.